Good morning, everyone. We're just letting people in and we'll start shortly. Just make sure everyone's in the right place. This is the University Personnel Town Hall, and we're focusing on student appointments today. Still having people come in, so a couple more minutes. Let's just give it another minute and we'll just get started and people can join as they come in. Again, welcome. This is our town hall and it's on student appointments. We have some subject matter experts here, so we're really excited to get you this information. This could be an area that has some complexity to it or just some confusion maybe about all the steps that need to be taken for the types of student appointments that we're looking at. So hopefully some of these questions that you might have about this will be clarified today. And if not, you can always reach out to us and ask us. I'm kind of seeing a lull in the number of participants coming in. So why don't we get started? Do you want to go to the welcome slide? I'm Joanne Wright. I'm Senior Associate Vice President, University Personnel. Again, welcome to everyone. This is going to be a presentation on student appointments. So everything that you want to know about student appointments, or most everything maybe, is going to be presented today by our panel of experts. I'm going to turn it over. Oh, just before I turn it over, just a reminder, there is the Q&A function available. If you have questions as we're going along, feel free to put the question in there and we'll try to get the answer to you today. We will have the questions posted after the town hall with the answers. So if the question doesn't get answered today, you will see an answer to it once it's posted. I'm going to turn it over now to Crystal Mercado. She is our manager of faculty services operations. Crystal, take it away.
Thank you very much, Joanne. Good morning, everyone. As Joanne indicated, my name is Crystal Mercado, manager of faculty services operations. And here is the agenda for today's town hall. This is regarding student employees, all of the related items about student employees. And just as we heard from Joanne, I'll introduce today our guest speakers. But before we go over that, these are our discussion topics. We'll talk specifically about academic student employees, student assistants, the hiring process, in general training, also for those student employees, the general information regarding them, and then lastly, offboarding and separation information. And at the very end, we'll have a wrap up just to go over all of the items at the end. Okay, today's presenters. Today, joining me, I also have Christy Martinez, Manager of Employment Authorization and Compliance Services. Also, Senior Director of University Operations, Taryn Ashley. So we will be presenting all of the information for you in this presentation. But first, I will begin today's presentation. We will first talk about our academic student employees, or as we like to abbreviate, our ASEs. Okay, so our ASEs are student employees whose work is of an academic nature. We actually have three classifications for these ASEs. They are the instructional student assistants, or ISAs, graduate assistants, or GAs, and lastly, teaching associates, or TAs. Here on the slide, I'll talk a little bit about the differences for each of the classifications, so that way you know what to choose in regards to hiring your student. So first, our ISAs, or instructional student assistants. Their duties mainly include tutoring and grading. They can work monthly by being appointed either by semester or academic year, and also they can work during the summertime. They can work up to 20 hours per week during the academic sessions, and also up to 40 hours per week during breaks. They are paid via an hourly rate, and ISAs must report the hours for each date of work within SJSU at Work. This classification, you can use that for undergraduate and graduate students. And regarding their expertise, the student must have the ability to learn and perform work. And lastly, the student must be enrolled in order to be hired in this position. Just note also that for ISAs, they can use work-study funds, and we can hire them in an ISA work-study position. So to hire them in a work-study positions, at first, departments should just make sure they have the appropriate position number and ensure that the student has accepted their work-study award. And in general, for work-study information, just refer to the Financial Aid and Scholarships Office to make sure that the student can use their work-study funds. The next classification here is going to be our graduate assistants, or GAs. And their duties can range from supervising students in classrooms, workshops, labs, under faculty supervision. They assist faculty with research. They also participate in evaluation of student work, in addition to a couple of other duties. They can work monthly or by semester or academic year. They can also work up to 20 hours per week during the academic sessions, or up to 40 hours per week during breaks. They are also paid by a monthly salary. And this classification is only for graduate students, I do have to say. Their expertise must come from the student's field of study, and the student must be enrolled in an SJSU degree program. My last classification here is going to be for teaching associates, or TAs. Their duties, of course, as indicated in their name, are mainly instruction or teaching in a classroom or lab. And they can work monthly or by semester or academic year, and also by session. They can work up to 40 hours per week. However, they are limited to 20 hours per week if the TA has other student positions on campus. TAs are paid via a monthly salary, and this classification, just like GAs, is only for graduate students. Their expertise must come from the student's field of study. And lastly, just like the GAs too, the student must be enrolled in an SJSU degree program. Here on this slide, we do have a resource titled Guidance for Choosing Student Appointment Classifications that is listed on the university personnel website. This document here has a lot more details in regards to the classification and should help you choose the right position for your student. So next is general information regarding our ASCs. We talked a little bit about eligibility on the other slide, but overall, the department should ensure that the student is a matriculated student, is academically eligible to be hired as well, and if the student is enrolled in the program where they will be working. There may be some specific courses that the student must take in order to be qualified for the position, so we do need to ensure that is being met. ASCs, they are members of a union. Their union is the UAW, or United Auto Workers. And the slide here has links to the union itself, as well as their collective bargaining agreement. Just note that the CBA does dictate the employment of ASCs, which we will need to follow. And the CBA includes notes about workload, for example, benefits, evaluation process, and more. So those are the things that are dictating the ASC's work. Now, ASCs can have more than one position, one student position on campus. And if so, they can work up to, or they can only work up to 20 hours per week among all of their student positions simultaneously. There is a caveat for TAs, I will say. TAs can work up to 40 hours per week if they only hold a TA position. However, if they have multiple student positions, At the same time, they can work no more than 20 hours per week among all of those positions. Also, to clarify, someone in a student position also cannot be hired simultaneously in a staff or faculty position. Now, in regards to the appointment itself, ASEs who are being reappointed to the same position and also in the same department should be paid at the same pay rate or salary rate or higher. So same rate or higher. And in terms of duration of appointment, they can be appointed either by semester or on an academic year basis. To continue on about general ASE informations, we do expect that supervisors set expectations for their employees. They should be reviewing the description of duties form with the student no later than 14 days of the student's start date. So then that way the student understands what they need to do and the tasks that need to be performed. And while the description of duties form has general information, when going over the expectations and the specific tasks, you can talk about the details, the execution of the task, the performance, and other things as well. One thing that can be brought up at that time is whether the student will be evaluated and the criteria of the evaluation. If departments hold orientation sessions for their ASEs, just know that union representatives must be invited to attend. The departments should invite the union representatives at least 30 days in advance, and during the orientation session, they should be provided with 30 minutes to present. Lastly, specific to ASEs, there may be required training involved, and if there is, the student should be compensated. If training occurs before the appointment, a separate appointment can be submitted, such as if there's training that happens during the summertime for their fall appointment, then a summer appointment can be generated. If training occurs during the appointment, for example, during the fall semester, the time base of the appointment can be increased to account for those training hours and pay the student that way. Okay, I will say that ASEs, students in these positions get great benefits. First off is parking. All ASEs get discounted parking. There is a difference, though, within the different classifications. The ISAs and GAs, they get discounted parking, but can park in student spaces, while TAs also get discounted parking, but can park in employee spaces. But again, despite all of this, ASEs, all of them, get discounted parking. For TAs only, there are health and dental benefits as long as a TA is appointed at half-time after 6 months. We have a link here to the benefits summary on this slide, so that way you can see more information about what the TAs get. TAs may be eligible for CalPERS and also may contribute to retirement as well. Going along with TAs as well, TAs only are eligible for the TA tuition reimbursement program, also commonly known as the fee waiver. And just know that this is considered a reimbursement program. TAs should be paying their fees on time, so then that way their classes are not dropped. And they should not be waiting until, for example, forms are processed. Again, paying by the drop deadline, so then that way their courses are not affected. TAs must be enrolled in a minimum of 3 units of coursework per semester. We have more specific information here on the slide for eligibility. However, also, our university personnel website has a lot of details regarding TA tuition reimbursement. And lastly, TAs and GAs, they do accrue sick leave, which begins after the first month of employment, and they also have bereavement leave available, which is 5 days. I would also like to briefly bring up information about the paperwork that is required by faculty services to hire an ASE. And here on this slide, we do have a quick chart that shows the specific appointment paperwork that we require from the department for each of the positions. And more information about the paperwork can be found on the link that's on here, that's titled Checklist for Academic Student Employees, Unit 11. Basically, all appointment paperwork does require a statement of terms and conditions, as well as a description of duties. But the difference comes into play when we talk about the details of the appointment. So when hiring ISAs, we require an employee profile, but when hiring GAs or TAs, the appointment form is needed. So those forms, either the employee profile or appointment form, in addition to the statement of terms and conditions, description of duties are needed, and the signed copies of all of those forms must be submitted to OnBase. That is where faculty services will review the appointment paperwork and move it to the next step, so that way their employment record gets activated. And here for ASCs, I do want to give a brief summary of the hiring process for the ASCs. And first, the biggest thing is that the department must analyze the need for an ASC and make sure to do any of the preparation work, such as reviewing the active position list, making sure you have position numbers for these for your students, funding and things like that. Next is also to advertise the job. And a common way to do this is via Handshake. For open hire positions, these positions are available for currently enrolled or admitted students that are not used to fulfill a commitment of support made to the student at the time of admission or under an existing advising relationship with the faculty member. The department can then go through the various applicants and applications to kind of narrow down who they want to hire. And next, departments should be verifying eligibility. This includes enrollment, and if the student is an undergraduate or graduate student. TAs and GAs, again, should be hired based on their field of study. For the chosen candidate, the student should then be given the intent to hire letter, which gives the student instructions regarding the onboarding process. This is used to comply with the I-9 and the job offer without forcing details like the final time base before becoming eligible to work. The department at that point will be filling out the non-CHRS recruiting onboarding form, which initiates the I-9 process as well as the onboarding process. And at the end of the onboarding process, the student will be getting their EVC. As a reminder for all employees must obtain the EVC before working. And lastly, the department will be generating the appointment paperwork and uploading the signed copies to OnBase, which then faculty services will take from there to review all of the eligibility and move forward for activating the employment. And that concludes the information in regards to academic student employees. We do have another classification, which are our student assistants. So I will have Taryn Ashley, our Senior Director of University Personnel Operations, speak to that.
Thank you, Crystal. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So in addition to the ASE student assistant, as Crystal mentioned, we also have our regular student assistant. And in this classification, job responsibilities are typically less complex than those of staff, and the hours are meant to be flexible to ensure ample time for academics. And I also noticed that a question came in regarding this of when would it be more appropriate for students to move into a staff position. And that's a very good question because the student classification is not meant to do union work. It's there to provide our students a way to gain valuable work experience while they still focus on their academics, as I said, and it should not be union work. So if they are completing work that would fit into a classification for an academic support or an administrative support, then you would need to reach out to recruiting would be the best place to get information about how to move them to a staff. So back to the student classification, these are hourly employees, meaning the hourlies are paid for all time worked, including training time. These classifications are open to both graduate and undergraduate students. CSU policy limits employment to 20 hours per week when school is in session and no more than 40 hours per week when not in session. Student employees should not be allowed to work more than 40 hours per week. and this is combined against all positions across campus. The distinction between the student classification and the bridge classification comes down to the FICA exemption. And FICA stands for the Federal Insurance Contributions Act. And this is our basic payroll tax that we have, which is Social Security and Medicare. The federal government has exempted student employees from paying these payroll taxes, provided they work no more than 20 hours per week when school is in session. The federal government allows student employees to work up to 40 hours per week when school is not in session, provided that that break period doesn't exceed 5 weeks. That is why we have to move the regular student assistants to the bridge students in the summer if they're not enrolled in courses. And the minimum enrollment to be exempted is 6 undergraduate or 4 graduate. So when the bridge classification, our students contribute to Medicare and PST. The PST is the part-time temporary retirement program that we have in lieu of Social Security. So student employees do not contribute to Social Security and their employment would not count toward that. So they contribute to PST in lieu of Social Security. And it's important to note that this one item, the FICA exemption, also applies to ASE students as well. Next, please. To be eligible for student employment, students must be matriculated and academically eligible. Student employment allows our students to gain valuable work experience while prioritizing their studies. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, it's not meant to replace staff or faculty positions. So we've given some information here from the student guide that the Chancellor's Office has provided about the basic expectations for student employment. And as Crystal mentioned with the ASE classification, it also applies to students. They can have multiple positions as long as their combined hours do not exceed the 20 hours when school is in session. And also student employees cannot work simultaneously in a staff and faculty position. So student employees are hourly employees. So they're paid for every hour that they work, and their hourly rate must fall within the established CSU salary schedule. We also adhere to the San Jose City minimum wage, which is currently at $17.55 per hour. Students are not eligible for benefits, including the various types of paid time off. And please note that while CSU policy prohibits students from working overtime, federal law requires employees to compensate overtime at a rate of time and a half. So it is important that supervisors monitor the work hours and do not let students work more than 40 hours per week. That is to be in compliance with CSU policy. If we fail to follow that policy and students are allowed to work over 40 hours per week, it must be reported and they must be paid for that time. And it's also important to point out that the information that I'm providing here today regarding student assistance is the policy as of today. As many of you have most likely heard, the students have voted to unionize and they are currently negotiating their first contract. And they will be covered under the umbrella for CSUEU. And we will provide more information once it becomes available. All student assistant appointment actions are submitted through OnBase using the UP Student Assistant Appointment Form. Please remember that the effective date must be on or later than the EVC date. Employees are never allowed to work without an EVC. If you're going to hire a new employee, rehire a former employee, or add an additional position, you must attach the appointment letter along with the appointment in OnBase. For a student pay rate change, we do require the pay rate change letter. For a position change, there's no appointment letter required. It's the appointment only. And for separations, we do need the profile and the resignation letter. And the separations, sometimes causes confusion because we do have mass term processes. For example, we mass term the ISAs at the end of the semester. We do mass term student employees after they have not worked for several months. But if you know that a student is leaving or they have resigned, they are entitled to pay within 72 hours. So please submit the paperwork as soon as possible so that we can make sure that we're adhering to the law. If you're going to submit a work study appointment, in the summer, you must attach the federal work study clearance form. For fall and spring, there's no attachment required for the appointment. However, it's very important that you make sure that the award has been given and accepted. And you can always reach out to the final aid office if you have any questions about whether or not you should be putting your student into financial aid. Sorry, into work study position. Next, please. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Christy, who will discuss appointment information.
Thank you, Taryn. Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about once you're ready to hire a student employee and about CSU Learn Compliance training. I hope that I'm also able to answer some questions in regards to processes as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. Once you have found the right student employee and want to start the hiring process, you will need to complete the non-CHRS onboarding Google form. The link can be found on the UP web page under Resources, Onboarding, and then click the non-CHRS Recruiting Onboarding Form I-9 link. And I believe it's also put in the chat. Once the department admin has completed the form, we will be able to start the process. The form notifies us that you intend to hire a new student employee and that we need to start the I-9 and new hire forms process. Within 24 hours, unless of course it's Friday, we will send the new employee a link to Tracker I-9 and a separate email. It's a welcome email from UP to complete the new hire forms. The link to Tracker I-9 will have instructions for your new employee to complete Section 1 of the Form I-9. The email that UP sends to the new employee will have the correct link to the new hire paperwork, and that is based off of whether they're being hired as a student assistant or an ASE. Once they have completed both the new hire forms and Section 1 of the Form I-9, we will send them another email with a link to schedule an in-person verification appointment. Once all the documents have been verified and completed, we'll send the employee and the department admin an employment verification email, what we call an EVC. On average, processing time for this process can take between 1 day to 2 weeks, depending on the situation. We do ask that you please not let your employee work before the EVC has been sent to the department admin. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Now I'm going to move over to CSU Learn Compliance training. All employees, including student employees, are required to complete CSU Learn Compliance training. These trainings are required and assigned based on an individual's hired work role. CSU Learn Compliance training are required by the Chancellor's Office to comply with federal and state executive policies, executive orders, policies, and laws. To complete the CSU Learn training, you can go to one.sjsu.edu. Then in the search bar, type in CSU Learn, then click on CSU Learn Online Training. Once you're in the system, click on Assigned Learning and see if you have any pending trainings. Just know that your student will need to log in the same way. All employees, including student assistants, are required to complete compliance trainings and should complete them during work hours. On the slide is a list of trainings that your students might be required to complete. For SJSU motor vehicles use, some students have to use a golf cart or a forklift. They are required to complete trainings. the same trainings as staff and faculty. For more information in regards to SJSU motor vehicle use, please click on the link Risk Management. Now I am going to go ahead and switch it over to Taryn for general information.
Let me unmute myself and try again. Thank you, Christy. The next topic covers both regular student assistants and ASE students. So we wanted to give a reminder that student employees are eligible for rest periods and meal periods. If they are entitled to a 15-minute paid break for each consecutive 4 hours worked. With the meal period, student employees who are scheduled to work 5 or more consecutive hours are entitled to a 30-minute unpaid meal period. If they work between 5 and 6 hours, the meal period may be mutually waived by the employee and the supervisor. Once their shift extends beyond 6 hours, the meal period is mandatory. Student assistants report hours on the timesheet in SJSU at Work. It is critical that hours be reported on the date in which the work was performed. We must have accurate records to ensure compliance with federal and state laws. Also, in the unfortunate event that a student employee is injured on the job, we need accurate information for workers' compensation. And the reporting the hours on the timesheet is for the instructional student assistants under R11 and also for the regular student assistants. The TAs and GAs have a set number of hours that they are paid each week based on their FTE. They only need to report hours if they work more or less than that set number of hours. So I've given a couple examples of what that would be. So when we provide the slide deck, you'll be able to refer back to that. Next. And now the most important topic is pay. So pay checks for GAs and TAs are the first of the following month. So the same for staff and faculty. Student assistant and ISA classifications are paid on the 15th of the following month. We strongly recommend all employees enroll in direct deposit and register for CalEmployee Connect. Employees may email the general payroll services at sjsu.edu email or contact their PPTS analyst for assistance with either of these features. For employees who have not enrolled in direct deposit, they can pick up their live checks at ADM 177. Now, the TAs are an academic year employee, and they receive 6 checks per semester. So their semester amount is divided into 6 equal payments. And we have a link that Melanie has posted into the chat that takes you to the academic payment schedule. For our GAs, they receive 5 paychecks per term, and those checks issue on October 1st for the fall and March 1st for the spring. Monthly GAs are hired usually in the summer, and they receive monthly paychecks for the period of employment that they work. As I mentioned before, if a student is injured on the job, they are entitled to workers' compensation, and there's also responsibility that they bear and that their supervisor, actions that their supervisor needs to take. So we've included this information for you to refer back to later. And it's important to remember that regardless of the severity of the injury, it should be reported. And if they need to seek medical attention, they need to do that first and then contact Jasmine Perez. And we've provided her contact information in here. The most important thing is medical attention. So the supervisor then needs to complete a report of the injury and submit that to UP to ensure that the employee receives workers' compensation if they're eligible. And for the offboarding, as I mentioned previously, we do a mass termination for the ASEs. So if your ISA, TA, GA worked the entire semester or the entire period that they were employed, you do not need to submit paperwork to separate them. We will do a mass term to separate those employment job records. If you have an ASE that ends early for whatever reason, they do not work until the end of the semester, that is when we need an appointment submitted. The appointment form submitted with an action of separation. Non-ASEs need paperwork if they're ending early. That also ends their access to the timesheet. And the reason why we ask you to notify us right away if they're ending early is because the federal law requires that we issue pay within 72 hours of the last date of employment. So we need to know that information so that we can get their hours, get it approved, and get their paychecks issued. And if you need any assistance with that, please reach out to your PPTS analyst. Also, separating them takes away the access from the system, so you will not receive the CSU Learn training notifications. You need to collect their keys from them and any university property that they have had. And separating them will also take away any extra access that you may have requested for them. So from there, I will turn it over to Joanne to talk about what's next.
Okay, my turn to turn my audio back on. Thank you very much again for attending. If you all have been following in the Q&A, there's been some interesting questions that we're trying to get answered as quickly as possible for you. Those questions and answers will be posted after the once we get it posted up on our website, along with a recording and other questions that may have been submitted beforehand that we didn't get to today. So do take a look in there. If there's some questions that we don't get to right here, then again, we'll be sending those out. But we do have a little bit of time, so we can go over some of those now if we wanted to, if the panel thinks there's some interesting things for people to know about generally overall. Feel free to jump in. I see Terrence answering a question now about the LCD audit, for instance. I think there's a question here I see about the financial aid office. I'm not sure that we can answer that question. And so we will have to look into that one too, because that looks like it's a financial aid office question, perhaps. I could be corrected there. Anyway, keep those questions coming in. Again, if we don't get all those answered right now, we will get those answered later. So we are also sending out an evaluation for the session. So if you could please fill those out. And also, please give us suggestions for future topics for UP Town Halls, because we do want to help, with any areas or issues that people are having. We would like to address those things that people see as common areas of concern, or just things they want to know more about. But in any case, are there questions that the panel would like to draw our attention to and provide answers right here and right now that are coming in? So you're just answering them on the online, but anybody wants to please talk about some of these questions, that would be good. If there's ones that you think everybody could learn from. There's lots of questions about mass termination and people being terminated. Taryn, is that mass termination? I've heard you said typically, so when there's that end date, they all get terminated, but it sounds like there's some that are maybe being left on these lists.
Yeah, I think that's the one I just answered, but for the regular student assistants, we stop the mass term in the summer because we're moving the students to the bridge, so they're not working in the regular student assistant position. So we don't want to mass term all the student employees that would then need to be reappointed. So we put that mass term on hold over the summer, and we'll be running that again shortly.
I thought this is an interesting question. I don't know that we have an answer right away to this one. Sometimes we do get a student, we will not know whether they are working in other areas. That's fair. For example, student union or Tower Foundation or research area. Is there any place we can look it up so the student assistant won't go over 20 hours? Do we have something in place that could help with that? Or is that something that we need to try to maybe work on?
We don't have anything where we can see that. And this applies to the 20 hours applies to SJSU employment. So if they're not being paid or hired through UP, we don't have any way to see that. So if the best way you're going to know is if you ask the student if they're working somewhere else on campus.
And we might want to look at, I know we have, for instance, faculty questionnaire, lecture question. We do ask about total work that people are doing, what work are people working on? Maybe it's something we could work into a form that we might have for the student to report that. At least we'd have it there.
Or on the application.
Yes, exactly. Of course, that won't help the first office because if they take another position, then they won't know the first one.
There's a question about what is the expected time for appointments to be submitted or appointments to be processed after they're submitted in OnBase. And the answer to that varies greatly on a lot of different factors, so it's hard to say. Some examples are, there are times that we receive an OnBase appointment 2 months in advance and we can't process that. So if you know that you're going to hire a student in the fall and you submit it in May, we can't process that in May. We're not going to process that until August. And then on the flip side of that, if the student was appointed in August and it's appointed in August when there's thousands of other appointments, then it definitely is going to take longer. So our goal is definitely to have all the appointments processed prior to the end of the pay period in which the effective date falls. We do everything we can to try to meet that. There's so many variables that come along with it, whether the attachments are there, if all the information is correct, do we have what we need from the employee? There's just a lot of variables outside of the OnBase appointment form. So I hope that answers that question. It's just not something that we could say it takes 2 days and have that be accurate. It's not possible.
What is the most accurate written guide for hiring departments that we can reference? I know there's been a lot of items put in the chat here. I think there was guidelines put forth here. So what is the most accurate written guide for hiring departments that they can reference?
For ASE employees, I would say it's the contract, the Unit 11 contract. And for regular student assistants, it would be the Chancellor's Office Student Assistant Guideline.
And we have guidelines posted, I think, on our websites too, right?
Yes, and those still have combined ASE and student assistant. We definitely need to work on updating that.
Yeah.
So we might want to just take it down altogether until it's updated because there are the other policies that are accurate.
Okay, we also have this presentation that we'll put up too. So hopefully that will work with all the links that we put here. So we'll have that posted for people to review and to access and to be able to refer to as well.
There's a question about pay for the regular student assistant hours and the bridge student assistant hours. And yes, there was a delay in that because the bridge appointments ended on July 30th for regular student assistants. So many students put their hours in the incorrect timesheet and are having to be moved over to the regular student assistant timesheet. So they will be issued separately. Any other questions?
What is UP's process for approving student assistant appointments? They don't seem to be approved in the order submitted. Sometimes it is taking 3+ weeks to be processed, and students don't have access to a timesheet at the end of the pay period. Someone take that question.
And I think this goes back to what I said before. It's not that they're being approved, it's that they're being, well, and I'm not sure if they're talking about regular student assistants or ASE. So ASEs go through an approval process through faculty services and then to operations for processing. So that's a two-step process where the student assistants come directly to us. And I know for sure in August, we have been behind. There have been a lot of appointments, and we are doing everything we can to get them finished. Normally, that's not the case. We definitely want to have them processed before the end of the pay period so the students have access to their timesheet.
I'm curious about the status of LAEP, the Learning Aligned Employment Program, which was in doubt last spring. Does that still exist? Is it on hiatus?
Unfortunately, in this year's budget, the governor's budget for 24-25, the funding for that program was eliminated.
It was mentioned that if the break exceeds 5 weeks, where does it say that? Is it written anywhere?
Yes, it is written, and we will put the link in the answers to the Q&A.
For students that take classes during summer session A only, can they work more than 20 hours during session B when they are not in classes?
Where is that question?
It's the very last one right now when I'm looking at the list on my screen. The last one in the Q&A. For students that take classes during summer session A only, can they work more than 20 hours during session B when they are not in classes?
Yes, students can work more than 20 hours when they are not in classes.
There's a continuation, I think, of the discussion about the mass termination. It says your answer about not terminating because bridge appointments are in place isn't making sense. A mass term post-graduation of all non-bridge appointments would actually be helpful since students very often put their summer hours on an active SA profile instead of on the active bridge profile. Would perhaps be useful to sweep the slate clean post-graduation. It's kind of a two-part.
Yeah, and I have looked into this, trying to get a list of who actually had graduated. I tried to get access to the database. I believe it's called SAMI, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a list. As of right now, I can continue working on that, but I don't have a list of students whose degrees were conferred. I don't know who graduated. So what we would have to do is do a mass term of all student employees and then have you reappoint them the next fall. And honestly, we have thought about that and would like to get feedback on that. So if you're on here and you feel like that would be something that you would like to do, just have 100% of student positions mass termed after the summer, the way we do with ISAs. I agree, it would be cleaner. We've been doing it the way that we're doing it to simplify it so that appointments don't have to be submitted every semester.
Okay, then going back to the question about the session A and session B, would those students need to be switched? Whoops. Oh, there it is. Would those students need to be switched to bridge for the summer session B then?
It all depends on the break. The break that they're out of school. If the break exceeds 5 weeks, then they're not exempt from the FICA exemption. And that's what it comes down to, is the FICA exemption.
Okay.
Liz, would the bridge profile stay? You mean if you submit an appointment for the summer for a bridge, yes, that would stay until it's mass termed at the end of that appointment. It might be easier to take, have that in a conversation.
There's a comment that says, I believe you can get the list of degrees conferred from the registrar's office.
Yeah, that's who I was working with. And at one point, I had actually been given access to the database, and then it was taken away because of FERPA and what is allowed to be provided. So I will definitely look back into that. Because we definitely would like to not have students putting their hours on the wrong timesheet either. It's a lot of work to move those hours.
When submitting a student assistant appointment in OnBase, it needs to be known if a student is a non-citizen. How is the department supposed to know this information? Is it appropriate to ask the student?
I can answer that one.
Okay.
When we submit the EBC, we put in the date that they can start working, which is the date that they have completed all of the requirements for the EBC and the new hire paperwork. If there's an asterisk in front of that date, that means that they are an international student and they should have international paperwork. If there's not an asterisk in front of the date, then you would process regular paperwork.
Are student assistants allowed to handle documents containing information such as student IDs and grades?
I don't believe that what is appropriate for student records should be addressed by us. I think that would need to be addressed by
Registrar's office.
Yeah.
FERPA. Liz follows up on the clean sweep concept. Could you sweep every student? Oops, there it is, except the bridge appointments.
Yes. Most likely the bridge wouldn't have been entered by then. There's another anonymous question about the bridge students. And the bridge students have already received their final check because it was for July. So all the students who have entered their time in the incorrect timesheet, it's being moved to the student assistant timesheet, and being issued as soon as it's corrected.
Question, can GAs supervise student assistants? A great question. Can GAs supervise student assistants? Don't know that they have supervisory duties included. I don't know, James or Crystal.
Correct. Usually for GAs, they do work under the supervision of faculty members. So at the end of the day, faculty or a supervisor does need to be available to supervise.
We will look, yes, there will be a question about, or looking into the student records question. And I think this is a second question. Can you address the need for a background check for students? For student employees is what I'm going to assume that means. Can you address the need for a background check?
I think we're
So-
going to need to take that one offline.
Yeah, I mean, there are some occasions that student assistants, depending on the role, will need a background check, but it depends on the position. So I really can't answer that. If there's some sensitive information, working with minors, just a whole host of things where we would ask for a background check. So if there are some current concerns, reach out to one of us and, we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like.
I see. Can you elaborate a little bit more regarding TAs that can work 40 hours? So I could just start that answer. There is a university policy which is inaccurate. So maybe somebody's thinking of that policy which states that TAs can only work 20 hours. However, the collective bargaining agreement, which supersedes, so that policy is a little outdated. Collective bargaining agreement provides that TAs can work 40 hours. I'm not sure if that's what the questioner is referring to or looking for there. But yes, TAs can work 40 hours. I don't know if James or Crystal wanted to add anything to that, but
That is correct. CBA does reflect that the student, TA specifically, can be appointed up to full-time, which is 40 hours.
looks like some of these questions are being answered. PeopleSoft seems to calculate the 20-hour limit based on a Monday start of the week, but the 20-hour limit is based on a Sunday to Saturday week. Is there a better way to track the 20-hour limit for a student?
I don't believe that PeopleSoft calculates it based on a Monday. It calculates it based on what is being displayed by the week. So if you start the weekly view on Sunday, then it would display it from Sunday to Saturday. If you are showing the week from Tuesday to Saturday, it's going to show the hours from that time. So if you just make sure the display shows from Sunday to Saturday, then it will show you.
To confirm, fall graduates can only bridge through winter break and not through spring semester. Is that correct?
That is correct. Per the Chancellor's office, this has been clarified multiple times, and they have said there are 4 terms: winter, spring, summer, and fall. Graduated seniors are allowed to work 1 term post-graduation. So if they graduate in the fall, 1 term is winter. They can work up to the day before the spring term starts.
And I would like to add to that too, for ASCs, they would not, there is no bridge classification for our ASCs. ASCs must be enrolled in courses in order to be in an ASC position. So the concept of working 1 term after graduation for an ISA, TA, or GA position does not apply.
And we should also add that it does not apply to international students either.
Important distinctions there. Okay, one more. I'll just do one more in here because we're almost at the end of our time, and any question that doesn't get answered here will be on the list of questions and answers that you will have access to once we get everything posted. One of my student assistants appointment was prematurely terminated because they were on a graduating senior list. Is there a way to avoid this premature termination and or a notification that could be sent to us so that we can take action?
It would be very helpful if you could maybe send me an email or an ID or a chat in my email with the ID so that I can look into that, because we certainly wouldn't want that to happen.
Okay. All right, so as we close out, we're at 10:59. I want to respect people's time. Thank you so much for attending, and thanks for all of these questions. It's really helpful to hear from you the information that you need. And we will get those questions and answers posted as soon as possible, so you'll have access to them. We'll get the things that you asked for, the different links up there, so that you have up-to-date information on the things that you're asking about policy and processes and procedures. And again, give us ideas that you would like to see for our next town hall. Have a great weekend. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.